Immigration bill, consequences of it in the trillions, say the Heritage Foundation. We're going to talk to the executive director of the Center for Immigration Studies, Mark Krikorian. He's going to be with us in the next segment. But right now we go to our good friend. He is a senior fellow, national security advisor, radicalislam.org. He works with the clarionproject.org, clarionproject.org. Radical Islam's Ryan Mauro. Ryan, great to be back with you. Happy Monday.
Thanks for having me back as always.
It's my pleasure, but I've got to tell you, I got to get to this, and I'm going to begin at the beginning, okay? And this is President Obama's original statement on the red line, chemical weapons. Roll it.
Hey, I want to make it absolutely clear to Assad and those under his command, the world is watching. The use of chemical weapons is and would be totally unacceptable. And if you make the tragic mistake of using these weapons, there will be consequences and you will be held accountable.
Pretty strong stuff. Now we move to Hagel just last week about supporting the opposition. Our Secretary of Defense looked a little, suspect when it came to saying either we're going to do it or not. We don't know. Roll it.
We must continue to look at options and present those options based on all contingencies with the focus that we all have, I think, in the international community to achieve the objectives the best way we can. So we're constantly evaluating. I think the President noted it a couple of days ago in his press conference, talking about rethinking options. Of course we do.
So you are rethinking, the administration is rethinking its opposition to arming the rebels?
Yes.
Okay. Now I will close with Jay Carney today. This would be B8 and Jay Carney talking about the red line, chemical weapons, Syria. Roll it.
We are highly skeptical of suggestions that the opposition could have or did use chemical weapons. We find it highly likely that any chemical weapon use that has taken place in Syria was done by the Assad regime, and that remains our position.
Okay, so a little CSI. Obviously, they're now pretty sure, even more sure, that the Assad administration, as they call it, would be it. We learned that Israel is responsible for attacking the weapons installation in Syria. Assad calls it an act of war. So now we turn to you and go, help, explain, what's next? What's going on here?
A whole bunch of things are going on. First of all, it's technically possible that some of the terrorists on the ground linked to al-Qaeda use some crude chemical weapons that they put together in one of their own shops. But that's just fits the technical definition of chemical weapons. It's not the chemical weapons that we're talking about, the real lethal, real scary stuff that the Assad regime has, by the accounts of British and French intelligence, been using. So basically what happened was that it looks like the Assad regime has called President Obama's bluff, that they knew that we've set this red line, but they understood that the U.S. wouldn't want to get involved militarily over the small use of chemical weapons, and so they're testing the boundaries. Now, earlier today, a UN official said that they had convincing evidence that the rebels had used chemical weapons, but now the UN is walking that back and saying that's still an open investigation, and they're still trying to figure out what happened, if anything. So no real change from the UN's perspective. As for what Israel did, Israel bombed some surface-to-surface missiles that were made by Iran and being shipped to Hezbollah through Syria, and killed about 40 of Syria's elite soldiers that handled those type of chemical weapons and missiles. So it was a very legitimate target, and Israel had every reason to take that out. And Syria and Iran right now are saying that they're going to retaliate. Syria is saying it's a declaration of war. But this type of rhetoric we've seen in the past, this sort of thing where the Israelis strike Syria and then they make a bunch of threats, has happened before.
Was that the strike that lit up and got the news? There was a fireball, and it looked like, I believe in Damascus, that there was some kind of attack. And was that the attack, or is that something altogether different and just another report from the war front?
Now, that was at least one of the Israeli strikes. It looks like there's been at least 3 over a short period of time, all aimed at destroying these Fatah 110 missiles that, if transferred to Hezbollah, would allow Hezbollah to shoot missiles at Tel Aviv. So if you're in the Israeli, from the Israeli viewpoint, it made perfect sense to take these out.
And for people who are not following this day in and day out and haven't started reading your work on a daily basis, which I'm sure they will following these interviews, the Hezbollah is the Iranian arm of terror. And a political group in Lebanon, obviously they have representation. But go ahead, please. Tell me who Hezbollah is.
Right. Hezbollah is basically Al-Qaeda on steroids. They're a very vicious terrorist organization that wants to wipe Israel off the map, make very anti-Semitic statements, and they've carried out many attacks on Israel, especially their civilians. And so we're always just one step away from war between Israel and Hezbollah. So if you're an Israeli official and you find out that these long-range missiles are going to be transferred to Hezbollah, you're going to take them out because you're going to say, why are they being transferred right now? I mean, it's very likely that the Assad regime and Iran are calculating that they want to pick a fight with Israel as a way of distracting the attention of the Arab world.
Okay, and tell me, do you think Israel checked with the United States before they launched this attack?
The U.S. is saying no, and I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, if you look at the history of leaks coming from U.S. government officials over several administrations, but especially the Obama administration when it comes to the Israel issue, you're not going to risk the safety of your pilots and the safety of your soldiers and everyone involved in that operation by telling the United States, oh, well, we choose to defend ourselves. It's a given.
The rebels in Syria, supported by the Muslim Brotherhood?
Yes, without a doubt, the Muslim Brotherhood is now officially back in Syria, which means that they're trying to build the apparatus of a political party. So it's not just about militarily fighting Assad's regime now. They're preparing for the post-Assad scenario where they can come in and win elections.
So you have Egypt, Muslim Brotherhood on one side. You have Iran and the Assad regime on the other. Is this a Sunni Shia break, respectively? And if so, can it be exploited?
On the one hand, the way it can be exploited is just by letting it be, because this prevents Iran and the Muslim Brotherhood from coming together in a super coalition, which I fear will happen once the civil war ends. That's the only reason that it hasn't come together. I understand the arguments of those that say they want this war to continue, but I look at the human cost of what's happening on the ground, and I just can't stomach that. But is this part of the Shiite-Sunni battle? Absolutely, because the Alawite minority from which the Assad regime comes from is an offshoot of the Shiites, and the Iranian regime views them as Shiites. And then the majority of the population of Syria is Sunni, so the Muslim Brotherhood and the other Arab states want the population to take control because they're Sunni like them. So this is very much a sectarian conflict, and that's part of the reason that this fight's just not going to end anytime soon.
But they can all come together and agree, hey, push the Jews into the sea, eliminate Israel.
I think so, yes. I mean, there's definitely elements on the ground that may hate Israel but don't want to get into a fight with Israel. So I'm not sure if they would sign on for a war. But if you're asking if it came down to that, where they had to choose either their brethren or Israel, then they're going to side with the surrounding countries and try and destroy Israel.
Do you think Assad's looking at this going, I can't win, I'm going to try to find a way out? Or is he sitting there going, I can win. I'll just wait him out. I'll kill a lot of people, and I will maintain my power.
I think he thinks he can win, and there's a few reasons for that. I think the biggest reason is that these dictators surround themselves with advisors that tell them what they want to hear. So they live in a fantasy world where they're not getting real information and analysis. But the second reason is that the rebels are stalled in their advances. Yes, it's still a vicious war. The rebels have gone from what was just a very small, minute force into launching a very vicious civil war. But still, the Assad regime isn't going to fall tomorrow. It's not going to fall next week. So if you're Assad, you're going to want to stay and live it up with your riches while you can in the country, because in war there's so many factors and so many things that can go wrong for your enemy that you might as well fight until it becomes clear you're going to lose.
Okay. And you surround yourself by yes men because no men die.
Exactly.
All right. Okay. Now, really to break this down, a lot of people are saying, why does it matter to us? And we ask this every day, every time we're on, Ryan, but I want you to explain it. Why we must have a policy and what should that policy be? Ryan Mauro, go.
Well, first of all, morally, if any American knew what was happening on the ground in Syria, they would say they have to do something, and the situation just cannot continue. I think a lot of it comes from the fact that many Americans, view Syrians as being very different from them, but if they saw the people on the ground, they would think differently. So there's the moral element. But in terms of national security, it's because Syria, right now, what you're seeing, the fight is between an Iranian proxy, and you're seeing a fight between the Muslim Brotherhood and al-Qaeda on the other hand, and neither of those scenarios of who controls Syria is good for the United States. And if there's chaos in Syria, then you're going to have tons of weapons and expertise falling into the hands of many people that hate you because all you need to do is show up with a paycheck. And furthermore, if the Muslim Brotherhood takes over Syria, or even if there's just chaos and they take over parts of Syria, that's another step towards resurrecting the caliphate, and that represents a strategic threat to our interests.
Very well outlined. You educate us every time, Ryan, and that's why you're probably on more than anybody else. And we love
great.
you, man. Thanks, bro.
Talk to you
Great
later.
to be with you. All right, Ryan Mauro, radicalislam.org. And a lot to digest there, but I hope you got the main part, which is you got to have a policy, got to support people who want to be free, and that doesn't mean boots on the ground, but it does mean stepping up and being the leader of the free world and speaking to those values and understanding the differences between our enemy and our allies. Crane Durham's Nothing But Truth. Send the message to Israel. We support them. AFR Talk.